Hi, my name's Harry Dewulf. It's 10 PM on a Friday, that's a green screen, and this is Answer Later. I'm answering questions in my Ask to Answer feed on Quora. If you want me to answer a question here, just request my answer via Quora.com. I will answer questions in English or French Quora. When you see me lean forwards, it's because I'm looking at the feed. Here's the first question for tonight. It seems as though all fights and conflicts between people arise from a clash of wills. Do you know why you seek to impose your will on others? If yes, why? Well, point number one. Okay, let's take them point by point. Point number one. It may seem as though all fights and conflicts between people arise from a clash of wills. They really don't. A clash of wills is a consequence, or a way in which conflict manifests itself. A lot of the time, when people realize that they are in conflict, they attempt to overcome the other person through strength of will, and as a result, what you get is a clash of wills. So, before you start blaming a clash of wills, which is definitely not going to solve any kind of problem, what you should really be looking at is the cause of the conflict in the first place. And in reality, I think that the majority of conflicts are actually caused by conflicting interests. That is to say, by two parties, it might be two people, it might be two groups of people, who, for instance, want to make use of the same resources, but who want to use them in different ways, or who want to use them for different reasons. And often, where that comes from is it can come from culture, from habituation, it can come from experience, it can come from what they know, or what they think they know, or how they have been educated. So most conflict, I believe, arises from some sort of competition, some sort of conflict or difference of interest, some sort of difference of desire, some sort of difference of belief, but not a conflict of wills. A conflict of wills is just a type of conflict. Then the second part of the question says, do you know why you seek to impose your will on others? If yes, why? I don't seek to impose my will on others, not even when I find myself in conflict with them. When I am in conflict, what I actually try to do is I try to understand the other person's point of view. I try to understand why it is that they want something that is so different from what I want that it creates a conflict. Because often I find through understanding that either what I thought I wanted is not really as important as all that, or I find that maybe there's common ground, or there is a third way, or fourth way, or fifth way, or sixth way, or if necessary, I ask someone else. So, this evening's tipple is in a thimble, as you can see. That is because this is Mirabelle. I suppose in English you'd probably call this by the German word Schnaps. This is a very dry, very strong alcohol made from fruit. It's actually made from a local fruit where I live called the Mirabelle, which is a type of plum. And it's delicious. It's something that you would drink as a digestif rather than an apéritif. So it's something you would drink after a big meal rather than before one. But it's also delicious to just have it as a Friday evening drink. And it's probably not going to affect, you know what? Yeah. It's probably not going to affect my ability to answer questions. Let's hit question number 2. Is this sentence a good example in which the verb do substitutes for a verb phrase plus complement construction? The students have to do the dishes. It is a very interesting use of the verb do. Effectively, what you've got is a verb made from, they say here, a verb phrase, to do the dishes. To do the dishes is a verb of its own. I mean, obviously what it means is to wash the crockery and cutlery, and perhaps the pots and pans, after a meal, that is, doing the dishes. We use do in this way, in this very annoying way in English, because in English we like to provide the precision of our meaning using the words that are around the verb rather than the verb itself. So in English, everyone understands that do the dishes is a type of washing, so we don't have to use the verb to wash unless we need to actually explain what doing the dishes is. Is it a good example? Oh, well, the other problem in this question is they say is in which the verb do substitutes. Do is not substituting. There is no such thing as substituting in language, just as there is no such thing as elision. There are ways to convey ideas that work, that are accepted, that are part of the convention or habitual use of the language, and there are those that are not. Trying to understand words like do, verbs like do, as a substitution is not going to help you. If you want to understand the way that the verb do is used, it's best simply to think, well, we make other verbs using it. In this case, do the dishes is a verb being made using do. That's probably as much as I need to say. So, next question. Why are characters depicted as black or white, heroes and villains, etc., in fiction, despite everyone in real life being morally grey? Okay, well, I mean, another false premise in a way. In a great deal of fiction, it is fair to say that there is let's say, a hard and clear contrast between those who are to be considered morally good and those who are to be considered morally bad. There are goodies and baddies. But I think that most people recognize that that is a somewhat infantile way of telling a story. Nevertheless, it's quite effective. And in fact, in a short story, in all short forms, so I'm including therefore movies, it can be very helpful if you establish that one character is very clearly and definitely meant as the good character and another one very clearly definitely meant as the bad one. It then says here, despite everyone in real life being morally grey. Now, in longer form fiction, you will find more moral ambiguity, and you will also find more moral cohabitation. Now, this is the point. Morality is not a scale. It's a big mistake to think of morality as a scale. And if you're an author, you're going to create difficulties for yourself. But also, if you're just trying to understand morality in general, if you think that morality is a scale where you have black at this end that represents bad, and you have white at this end that represents good, and then there are shades of grey across the middle, you're not going to understand human behaviour at all. You see, each individual human being is not somewhere on that scale. A dark grey, a light grey. They're not, it's not that some of us are charcoal and some of us are anthracite and some of us are off-white and some of us are magnolia. It's not that at all. The way that morality works is that people adopt particular moral positions on particular questions. And as a result, what you get in real people is moral cohabitation. This means that on some questions, a person might take a position that you would consider to be extremely morally good, and on another question, they might adopt a position that you think is morally ambiguous, or you might think it's morally neutral, or you might think it's morally non-committal, or you might even think that it is morally wicked. Now, I keep saying you might think. But in fact, in many cases, these individual questions are ones where there is a broad consensus as to what is the morally good position to take, what is the morally good decision to take, what is the morally good path to choose. And yet you can have people who are highly immoral in some areas of their lives and highly moral in others, just as you can have people who are highly principled in some areas of their lives and who are unprincipled to the point of ruthlessness in other areas. That's the way that real human beings work. The way that real human beings work is that we are, in fact, full of contradictions, and it's natural. Dissonance is a natural state for us. And in fact, this is the prime reason why you don't see a lot of moral greyness in fiction. You don't see a lot of moral greyness in fiction because it's almost impossibly difficult to write. Supposing you said to yourself, right, this particular character is just a little bit whiter than halfway between black and white. Now, if you imagine that that's the shade of grey that they are, what you've now got to do is for every single moral question that comes up, choose a position that matches that particular shade of grey. That is not how people are. People adopt a position on a particular moral question when they have to. Most people avoid adopting a position until they have to. So morality is actually something that we build up piecemeal. So we build it up bit by bit as we encounter unavoidable moral decision points. So I guess that looks to me like the answer to the question. So, and I've got another 8 minutes of recording time available. What defines... Okay, I'm not going to answer this one because I've already answered it in the answer to a different question. Okay, another one. Do you agree or disagree with the following statement? Womanliness must, by virtue of contrast, be all things manliness is not. Okay, there's an awful lot of false premise in this question. But I'm going to read this statement to you again. Womanliness must, by virtue of contrast, be all things manliness is not. I'm wondering where to start. Shall I start with contrast, or shall I start with womanliness and manliness? Okay. Educational problem. Most people realise when they reach a certain age that what they have been taught as opposites are not opposites. It's true that our visual system, even our colour visual system, is based on contrast. We differentiate things by contrast in colours. That's why I'm able to replace what is in reality a green cloth behind me with a picture of what I can see on my computer screen, because there is a contrast. And colour contrast is being used by the computer to remove the green and replace it with the screen recording. Excuse me, I think I'm going to sneeze. Sneezing is one of the effects of Mirabelle, incidentally. Well, we'll find out. Maybe I will, maybe I won't. Contrast is important. Contrast is often quite a subtle difference. In last week's Answer Later, I'm sorry, just casting around me for a green object, because in last week's Answer Later, I had a green beer bottle in my hand. And the green beer bottle, although it wasn't quite the same shade of green as the background, so you could still see it was a beer bottle, but it was also getting replaced as it moved in front of me. So, I mean, if I grab this is one of my electric screwdrivers, and the main body of this is green. It's quite a dark green though, but you can see, I just vanished the background, and you can see the contrast between the green of the green screen and the green of this object. And in fact, I can adjust the green screen so that it would still pick up the green of this object. That's a contrast. Okay, a contrast is a very much a subtler difference than an opposite. I was just talking about black and white. Black and white are so extremely contrasting that we've a tendency to describe them as opposites, but opposite they are not. In fact, outside of our imagination, there are hardly any true opposites. So that's a problem to start with. Do womanliness and manliness contrast? Yes, but does contrast mean that one thing is all the things that the other is not? No, it doesn't mean that at all. And indeed, if you you have two ideas that you consider to be contrasting. Do you in fact define them in terms of one another? I mean, if you did that, by the same argument, manliness must be all the things that womanliness is not. So how do you decide what either of them is to start with? If they are defined in terms of how different they are from one another, which one is the originator? You end up with this kind of logical chicken and egg. It's impossible to describe either womanliness or manliness because both of them are defined in terms of not being the other one. It's kind of like if you said, well, okay, what's a square? Well, it's not a triangle. This is, in fact, this is Baldric's definition of a cat, not a dog. So I don't even need to go into the question of what is the meaning of womanliness, what is the meaning of manliness, because the question asks, can you define either of them by contrasting them with the other? And no, you can't. That's mad. Should I attempt to define womanliness and manliness? No. No. That would be much too political for me. I'm going to see if I can squeeze in one more. What are some specific creative writing prompts that force you to think creatively? One thing forces you to think creatively, and that is backing yourself into a corner. This is something that I say a lot to my students. It's something I've repeated in a number of my courses. Necessity is not the mother of invention. Restriction is the mother of invention. If you want to be creative, what you need is limits. What you need is rules. What you need is restrictions. What you actually need to be told is what you can't do. The best way to be creative is not to have the most, is not to free your imagination. It is to restrain and constrain your imagination. So the best writing prompts are, in fact, to steal a word from the question, the best writing prompts are the ones that are the most specific. And the easiest way to do that is to paint yourself into a corner. So imagine a situation that you can't think of a way to get out of. So just create some sort of trap, some sort of set of circumstances from which a character or more than one character, ideally more than one character, cannot escape. Either something is going to happen that can't be avoided, or something that's already happened that means that you are trapped, or something is in the process of happening that you have no means of preventing. Create a situation like that, and then ask yourself, what are the characters going to feel? What are the characters going to think? What are the characters going to say to each other? What strategies might they attempt? What risks might they take? What sacrifices might they make? And all of that will prompt you into telling a terrific story. This has been Answer Later. Thank you for watching, and good night.